I started developing a character, a 25th century female astronaut who comes to the planet to remind us of our connection to the stars. So I still have that idea, and now I'm seeing it that it's really about our connection to the Earth and how we've lost that. I'm more and more interested in going back to what I was doing with the Earth, with pigments that are really about history and very elemental things. I've been thinking about the question about conservation. In a way, it's about preserving who we are as human beings in a very elemental way that is so important to connect to. I feel a need and a mission to make pieces that remind us of that. I'm Lita Albuquerque. I'm an artist working in the environment. The work is about locating ourselves in the planet and in the cosmos and in the universe, and using elemental materials and the earth and pigments and rocks, and talking about who we are and having a remembrance of who we are, works that ignite that. I grew up in North Africa, in Tunisia, in the historical city of Carthage, in a Catholic convent. I was there from the age of 3. The country of Tunisia is very beautiful. It's blue everywhere. My blue definitely comes from the blue of the Mediterranean, the blue of the sky, the different color blues. You're surrounded by the beauty of nature, the fragrance of flowers. Jasmine is everywhere, and the earth. And in Carthage, there's this sense of history and really feeling that very intensely. My mother had been to the US before. She was a playwright, wanted to go back to Hollywood and to write, and I didn't. And it was very, very difficult. But at the age of 11, she and my brother and I moved to the United States. And we ended up in Southern California. At that time, I thought I was going to be a poet. And I started writing poetry, but then I started living in Venice on my own and surrounded by artists like myself, and really started having all these needs to really talk about or to paint or to make art about light and about what light did to our perception, and also working out in the land, and that was a very rich place to come to. But the shift of coming from another country, another culture, a very multicultural and also multi-religious culture to the United States. I didn't speak English. It was really a huge shift that took me decades. Still to this day, I'm still like half and half. But the nature in Tunisia and nature here in Los Angeles, Southern California, has a similar quality of light and a similar fauna and flora as well. So that was really a beautiful thing. And at that time, the Los Angeles scene was Venice. We were really having fun and coming up with ideas. And then there was a big moment where Robert Irwin had done a project in Rizzo Mitsuno Gallery, where he had put a black tape at eye level, and all of a sudden you were in a space that had 2 volumes just by a single mark. It totally changed how I thought about things. At that time I was painting, and all of a sudden it wasn't about a 2-dimensional surface on the wall, it was about space. Another one was Susan Kaiser-Vogel, who did a project. It was outdoors, and it was a 10 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet high, 4-sided walls. She had very lightly put light blue pastel, and you walked into the space and you looked up, and her piece completely melted into the sky. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. All of a sudden, Tunisia came back, the blue, and I decided I want to now do pieces that are about our relationship to the earth and the sky. So that's when I really started using the blue. And the first blue that I used was on this artist colony. The very first piece was Malibu Line, which was essentially just a trench, 14 inches wide by 41 feet. I filled it with ultramarine blue pigment. But perceptually, as you walked up the hill and you came upon it, it did what her piece did. It went all the way to the horizon, to the ocean, because the ocean was right there, and completely melted into the ocean, but also formed a cross at the horizon line. And that's what made me do that piece. I was dancing at the time, and I was going up the hill, and the verticality of my body against the horizon line, I realized, well, this is maybe how ancient people did symbols. It was through the relationship between the human being and the environment. And so that was a very powerful moment. It was in 1978. I used to think that every gesture means so much. And on one hand, it does. For instance, if it's my hand, it's going to have a different feel. Recently, we've had to do protocols, like if somebody wants a piece, and I'm not around, you give them instructions. There is a slight difference with feeling, with a certain kind of feeling. I mean, that's the whole subjectivity of the work. But I think it can be done. I think the pigment itself has a certain subtlety itself. I remember a piece that I reenacted from 1978 at the show in Brussels that I just had, which was on a pedestal, and somebody else redid it, and it looked the same, right? So it can be done. The feeling is in the material itself, whereas before I was attached that it had to be my feeling. But I think the materiality itself has the feeling. And I think that's what I love about it. When you put down pigment on salt, what happens? I used to only be the one to do the salt. And I thought, it had to be me. Well, it doesn't. I can instruct how I want it. But the materials themselves and the juxtaposition of materials contain the feeling. Documentation is obviously very important. It is an ephemeral gesture. And it is about dust to dust in a way. But what's important to me is through the use of color and certain geometries, there's an image that stays in the mind, right? And so it's that the trace that remains will always be there. A video of my work is an extension of the work, not a separate clinical thing. It's not just documentation. It is what a lot of times is the only thing that people can see, the view from above. That's really important to me because all the work is about that kind of relationship. Spine of the Earth, 1980. I actually went up on a small airplane at that time and shot it from the air. Completely different piece. All of a sudden you could see that there was almost like this volume, a cube coming out of the Earth. And I talk a lot about that relationship between the two, what's seen from the air and what's seen from the ground. I did a couple of performances. One of them was for the Getty Museum, PSD, the Performance Festival in 2012. Well, we redid this, but I redid it as a performance. So instead of having a red spiral of pigment, I used a skydiver who came down exactly in the center, and 300 people dressed in red went around them and then went down this mountain, and the idea was that their experience, each individual's experience, was the experience of going down this mountain, being with all these people, but they couldn't see much. But I had Michael Light, this wonderful photographer, up on a helicopter shooting, and you could see what the project was, which was this red spine in the earth. So that's the piece as well as the experience of the performance itself. And so it's always talking about look at things from another perspective. The difference that we see things this way, but there's a bigger picture. So it's always about that bigger picture, just like the 25th century female astronaut wants us to remind us of the bigger picture. It's a bigger picture and it's a very intimate picture. And the intimate picture is so important because we tend to forget. I have experienced conservation attempts on a painting that were not successful. And I think it's really important not only to have a protocol with these kinds of works, but in paintings to actually describe everything that I do. Because it is like the freedom that I have. I have the same kind of freedom with the paintings that need to be recorded if I want that to occur. And it's really important to have that. And many times I can't even do it and I have to take down the entire painting and restart all over again. So that happens frequently. When I'm reimagining works that I had done in the past and remaking them, on one hand, you can't go back to the past. On one hand, I am making the past present. It's all about the whole obsession with time And I think artists are always wanting to preserve, and we want to freeze time. It's this thing of needing to remember the moment, and yet it always changes, right? And I think that freedom also with the work has to do with art. We try and abstract from life. And I realize that they're experiences. They're not things you only look at, they're to be experienced. So it's like life, and you can't capture life, right? So it's a very interesting place to be as an artist and as conservation, but also as a philosophy. You know, it's like, who are we and what do we have to preserve? When I first did those works in the 70s, it was much more an experiment. I was just doing them, and now it feels that they're going somewhere. And there's a love that happens. There's an evolution that happens. But the other thing that's going on is I'm now evolving the work, and I'm taking the ideas and doing something else. Before I used to work in the earth. Now I'm taking earth materials and working with them here with the pigments. It's just a very exciting moment. It's still the unknown, and I think I've always loved being in the unknown, and I think maybe that's that whole sense of freedom. That's a very important element, to not know what's going to happen. And so that I'm at that moment right now, which is great.